I also talked with Trent Bowers from the Worthington City School District in Franklin County, which includes that suburb and part of Columbus. It's one of the state's larger districts with more than 10,000 students. Worthington passed a levy in 2022.
When we went to the voters, we said this is going to last 4 years. We're going to be back in 2026 for an operating levy and a bond issue. We have now said, hey, we want to extend the life of that, right? We think 2026 is too early. We can make this last until 2028. But that cash balance allows that to happen because we are in deficit spending, and so we're spending down some of that cash balance. We've planned to utilize that. If arbitrarily there was a cap on that cash balance and we had to refund that to our taxpayers, that is a win to our taxpayers in the short term, right? So in a single year, you're going to pay less. However, we're going to have to come back and ask for an increase in our revenue, and we're going to have to do that earlier than we had planned because we no longer have that cash balance. And so we obviously understand in many parts of Ohio, House Bill 920 is not working the way it was intended to, right? So I think one of the challenges for our representatives is they are feeling with historic property value increases this property tax challenge. And in their local communities, when there's a reappraisal, their school district might be getting all of that money from the reappraisal. And so that's a quirk in the system, but I'm not sure they understand that in our suburban districts, and we have lots of advantages, let's be honest, but in our suburban districts, House Bill 920 is treating that differently than it is in 300 to 400 other school districts. And so I think people come to Columbus as a representative, they know what happens in their area, and they want to make sure there's a shift. And so part of what we would be saying is, okay, let's look at this more collaboratively. We do appreciate the governor's work group because there's a couple superintendents on there. They can tell their story. How does it work in Fort Fry local? How does it work in Dublin? Those are totally different stories. And we need a system that's not a sledgehammer, but that works for all parties.
You're also concerned, and you've raised concerns about a bill that would eliminate the 1% of property tax value that schools and local governments can levy without voter approval, known as inside millage.
Yeah, so inside millage for us was about $14 million a year. And so again, if those two things were to happen, right? So when we talked about that, if all of a sudden we didn't have our cash balance that we had counted on, and we lost, say, $14 million a year, then we obviously need to either immediately go back to our voters and ask for a revenue bump to replace that money we lost. And we're fortunate in Worthington, there's a reasonable chance our voters would approve that and say, hey, we don't want to make reductions. But the other option is you have to make reductions, right? You have to reduce your budget to meet the revenue that you have.
You're talking about cutting teachers, you're talking about cutting positions.
You have to, right? Because we're a service industry. So 85% of our budget is salary and benefit of employees. We're just like a healthcare organization. We hire people to work with kids. We don't have a lot of extra fun stuff. We have a water bill, we have a gas bill, we have an electric bill, just like everybody else, a giant internet bill, right? So there's not in that budget, most of it is people. So the only way to make a meaningful reduction to a budget is to modify people. Now, that could be reducing positions, that could be changes to a collective bargaining agreement, right? But employee compensation is the driver of cost when it comes to school districts because we're a service industry.
Worthington often makes the lists of wealthiest suburbs in Ohio, but your district is not necessarily a wealthy district. I mean, 31% of your kids are economically disadvantaged. So you don't have the advantages that some wealthier districts do in terms of the money that is coming in.
Yeah, so obviously, Worthington Schools is super fortunate. We have an area that cares deeply about kids. It's been foundational in our Worthington community, and we are property wealthy, right? So in a system that relies on local property taxes, Worthington is wealthy. Now, the income of our residents is more mixed. 30-some%, as you mentioned, of our students do qualify for free and reduced lunch. That makes us like many of our suburbs in the Columbus region on the 270 outer belt. So we have tons of advantages. But we are a community that serves a diverse student population, 10,831 kids this year. Over 1,000 of them speak a language different than English. 1,500 qualify as students with special needs. So obviously we need a lot of resources to work with our student population and provide for them what our community expects.
What is the pressure like for school districts to come up with different solutions with all of the hurt that property taxpayers are feeling. What's the pressure like on you folks to come up with different ways to do things, come up with different ideas to try to make this a little bit easier on taxpayers?
Yeah, I mean, so, with the historic rise of property values, and when I started my career, so I started in the 1990s, I've gotten old, farmers and residents were paying about 50% of the property tax, and business was paying about 50%. We've made a lot of state tax changes, policy level changes over the last 35 years. So now residents are paying 67% of that share, business is paying 33% of that share. Some of that's been positive, right? So we have brought business and jobs to the state of Ohio. When we talk about reducing the income tax, for working families, that might be a positive change. But the challenge is, with that shift to local property taxes and residents paying more, if I'm a senior citizen or if I'm on a fixed income, that's pretty significant. Now again, I think in the suburbs, House Bill 920 has reduced the challenge as it was intended to. So when there's a reappraisal, Worthington values have gone way up, but our tax rate has gone down as that happens, and some people have seen a reduction in taxes when that happens. And so I think the conversation in the suburbs might not be as acute as it is in a small farming community, because in some of those communities with reappraisal, the school district has captured the full amount of that reappraisal. And I can understand my farm might not be worth more unless I sell it, and all of a sudden I've got a much larger bill. So we obviously, we want a system that is predictable and sustainable for schools, right? We rely on local property taxes because that's the system that Ohio set up for schools to rely on. And so that's the system that we've used. If that system shifts, I think that's okay with us if there's a better model out there. We would just want that to be thoughtful. We'd want there to be a plan in place, something that can be phased in so that it helps taxpayers, but also provides the local services for schools, police, fire that honestly all of our communities desire.
Veteran Republican lawmaker Bill Seitz is a co-chair of DeWine's working group. He has suggested there are two tax relief ideas that could come up in the group's recommendations to the governor: a circuit breaker, which cuts taxes at a set percentage of income, and an increase in the homestead exemption for older and disabled homeowners. But both of those would require state funding.